Hello, my loves, and welcome to both this episode of Strange Playgrounds, but also to an impromptu Clive Barker retrospective. Regarding today's subject matter, I thought I'd done it. I thought I'd actually already done a retrospective on Mr. Be Gone, and I'm very surprised at myself that I haven't. I remember recording it. Maybe I recorded it and then didn't put it together or didn't upload it or wasn't pleased with the review for whatever reason. But whatever the case, it has to be done. I mean, Mr. Be Gone is... It's sort of a pivotal work in Clive Barker's back canon, simply because it marks the point at which a lot of Clive Barker's established fan base jumped ship. It marks the point at which people realised that the Clive Barker who wrote Weave World and Imagica, the Books of Blood, and all of those wonderful, wonderful books probably didn't exist anymore, or was not going to be writing in the same way anymore. That's not to say that it's bad or that it's offensive or anything like that. It's just very, 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 very different. It was an odd one in so many ways. It came out of nowhere. For one thing, there was hardly any preamble to Mr. Be Gone. There was nothing on Clive Barker's Revelations website about it before it came out. There was no news in like horror magazines or whatever. It just dropped. It was just suddenly you'd go into bookshops and there it would be on the shelf. This very odd-looking book, quite thin for a Clive Barker book, and kind of redolent in its original copy anyway. Kind of redolent of those classic Books of Blood covers. Which is interesting, because although the book is very, very different stylistically and thematically from what Barker usually writes, it does have some resonance with some of his older work. If you look at the metaphysics of Mr. Be Gone, which is very much a kind of hieronymus Bosch Christian eschatology, it is very much the notion of there being an established heaven and an established hell and earth in between, with humanity being kind of like the pawns or the playthings of higher and lower powers, and of a great war being fought for the state of creation, essentially. It is redolent of stories like the Yatteringan Jack, which is one of Barker's earliest published works in the Books of Blood. It seems to be... The Yatteringan Jack could be of the same mythology very easily, as could The Last Illusion very easily. The hell that's painted here, most of this story occurs not necessarily in hell, but from the perspective of something born of hell. The hell here is like a Hieronymus Bosch painting. It's Dantean, basically. It's a very classic hell where demons are born to hell. They are these mean, cruel, spiteful avatars of negativity. They're there to punish the souls of wicked humanity, and so on and so forth. But the book kind of goes further than that, and it introduces a kind of domesticity to demons. At the very beginning, you actually get an account of the narrator. The narrator is actually a demon by the name of Jacobok Botch, or brilliant name, by the way. Jacobok Botch is absolutely wonderful as the name for a demon, and for this demon in particular, because he's not very good at what he does. He's kind of like a Neil Gaiman style character in that regard, or a Terry Pratchett character. Jacobok Botch is a low-born whelp of a demon. He's pathetic. He's from the upper layers of hell, which means that he's closer to humanity than those that reside on the lower layers, and he's a bit pathetic, to be honest. He hasn't got any grand powers or any great ability. He's just an ugly, spiteful little brute, and that's it. He's a whelp. He's a weakling. And it's about, the story basically recounts, it's a first-person account of Jacobok being fished from hell by this group of human demon hunters, and how he then, now that he's released from the metaphysics and the politics of hell, and indeed of heaven, he can kind of do what he likes. He's not, like, innately evil, which is rather interesting. He is cruel and he is spiteful, but he's not entirely irredeemable, which is rather interesting. He's quite a complex character in that regard. And the book is a first-person account, but it's also the whole shtick with the book, and it's not something that's new. It's been done before, and it's certainly been done since. Jacobok actually talks to you from the book. The book is Jacobok. It's actually a living entity. That's the point. Jacobok is kind of imprisoned in the book as you're reading it. And one of the cleverer things about the text is that it preempts the way you react to that. It talks to you directly. And as it's describing things from Jacobok's past, it's preempting how you're going to react. It's saying things like, I saw your eyes flicker across the page then, I saw you blink, I felt you sweat onto the page, that kind of thing. It's quite clever. It is quite clever because it establishes a rapport and an engagement with the text that wouldn't otherwise be there. If this story were recounted in a drier, more traditional way, it would actually be pretty awful, it has to be said, especially from the pen of Clive Barker, because it doesn't. One of the complaints about it is that it doesn't in any way, although there are big ideas here and big images and big metaphysics, they're definitely in the background. They're not part of they drive the main story, but they're never really described. They're just background stuff. The main thrust of the story is Jacobok and his first-person experiences of living in the human world, which is kind of interesting. It's kind of interesting. He has encounters, he has relationships, all sorts of stuff happens to him, and it is actually really interesting. And it ends with a profound pun, a kind of pun on human history, on the nature of literature and fiction itself, on meta-narratives. And in that regard, yeah, it's kind of clever. It is kind of clever, but it's not. It is in no way as profound as anything Barker has ever played with before. The tone of the thing is completely different, for one thing. It has this kind of happy-go-lucky like jollity about it. Even at its darkest moments, it has this kind of levity. It lacks the weight that books like Sacrament or Imagica have. It doesn't take itself as seriously, and in that regard, it alienated a lot of people. Stylistically, it's completely different. It could have potentially been written by someone else, you know? It doesn't feel like a Barker book. It's a complete stylistic turnaround. It's got more in common with some of Gaiman's lighter stories and some of Pratchett's stories than it does with Clive Barker's back canon. It's really strange in that regard. But it is good. It's well written. It is very well written. And the trick of the book being alive, of it talking to you, works really well. That works really bloody well, because it's quite acute. It does preempt and predict the way you're going to react as a reader to certain things. So Jacobok will say certain things to you, and you're like, oh, yes, I did do that. And it does creep you out a little bit. There's a point all the way through, the enjoyment to the reader is burn this book. Burn it before you continue reading. That's what Jacobok wants you to do. He wants you to burn the book, ostensibly to end his suffering, although you find out later on that, you know, he is a demon, so he is lying to you. Of course he is. He's trying to manipulate you. And he uses every tactic in the book. He uses every trick he can think of. He tries to charm you. He tries to appeal to your better nature. He tries to appeal to your mercy. He tries to threaten you at one point. He says at one point, and it's really rather clever, he says, with every page you read, I'm getting one step closer to you. And if you continue, I'm going to harm you in such an unimaginable way. And that works really well. It creates this sense of engagement with the text that you wouldn't have from a more inert text, perhaps. That said, it is phenomenally light. I mean, Barker himself said that it's a fun one, and it is. And I think that would have worked had Barker been consistently producing stuff over the course of that span, but which he hadn't. There had been lots of rumours floating around, lots of promises and ideas concerning things like the Scarlet Gospels, which took literally decades to come out, and other projects, but which never transpired. So there was this long gap of nothing, absolutely nothing. And then Mr. Be Gone hit, and it came out of nowhere, and people were reasonably excited, but then I think rather disappointed, because it wasn't what people considered to be classic Barker. It wasn't what people considered to be traditionally Barker. And I totally understand that, because of course the guy who wrote Mr. Be Gone is a different man from the one who wrote Imagica, and certainly the one who wrote Galilee. He had a lot of experiences, and if you follow Barker as a man, lots of traumas up to that point. So of course it's going to be a different guy writing with different perspectives and different intentions, and you can definitely feel that in Mr. Be Gone. It's a fun book. It's well written. again, it hurtles along. I mean, it's a page turner. You can just keep. It's very light and frothy, so you can just you can read 40 pages and it feels like you've read 4. It's that kind of book. It's very, in that regard, it is the antithesis of weightier stuff, more poetic stuff like Galilee, like Imagica, like Weave World. It is the antithesis of that. It's almost a tonic to that. And in and of itself, it works very well. It's an entertaining book, but don't ever come to it expecting any of the ideas or profundity or invention that you'll find in Barker's earlier work, because you just won't find it. You won't get it. It is not that book. And if you feel that would disappoint you, then yeah, it will. It profoundly will. It is not that book. It is its own peculiar thing. For me, it works. For me, I like it. I enjoy it for what it is. But I can certainly say it is nothing even close to the work that has gone before. It is nothing even close. It's something that these days, I mean, at the time, it sort of indie authorship hadn't really come about, but it's the kind of thing whereby these days it works less well now, because nowadays, of course, publication has been somewhat liberated, and there are lots of writers out there who are working in independently or self-publishing, all of whom, not all of whom, definitely not all of whom, but many of whom have produced better work than this, but without the name attached to it, without the publishing houses behind it, without the gravitas or the impetus. And that does render it very disappointing. That does render it more disappointing as time goes on, because, of course, this is a mass-published book. It's a mass-published book. It's very pretty. It's a hardback. It's very well produced, and it's the kind of thing that you'll find on bookshelves in good bookstores. It will sell, but it's not that great. It's certainly not up to the standards that one would expect from Clive Barker. But it is decent. It's a fun read in and of itself, if you can sort of shrive yourself of context, if you can put aside your absolute adoration for books like Weave World and Galilee and Imagica and the books of the art, then maybe you'll get something from it, you'll have something fun. But I wouldn't come to it expecting anything beyond that, because you will be disappointed. And that's kind of a shame. That is kind of a shame. I mean, don't get me wrong, I get that Barker is a different guy. The Barker who wrote this, that's my cat, Rufus, by the way. Go away, Rufus, you've had your food and everything. Anyway, Barker is a different man. The man who wrote Galilee and all those other books literally doesn't exist anymore. And he's trying to explore and express and experiment with something different. My big problem is that the experiment is actually lesser than what has gone before. It's not new enough. It's not experimental in the way of like the Abarat, for example, which is way better. I mean, that's way, way better than this. And also, I also get that the guy has been writing for a long time and has played with some really big ideas, some really experimental images, and maybe he's just done it. Maybe he doesn't want to write the same stories anymore. You know, I get that. I totally understand that. But this one is a turning point for a lot of Barker fans. They either love it or they loathe it. No, they don't even... No, that's not true either, actually. That's not true. They either loathe it or they kind of like it. That's it. It is a kind of like book. It's a chocolate bar book. You can read Mr. Be Gone alongside lots of other things, and it serves as a kind of aperitif or as a digestive. It's not a main course by any stretch. It's not even it's not like a grand dessert, you know? It's a chocolate bar. That's what it is. And that said, it does have a kind of twist ending where something is revealed. There is this talk all the way through the book of a great weapon that humanity is going to make very soon, and that the agents of heaven and hell are warring over, because it will change everything. It will change the balance of the war itself between heaven and hell. And when it's revealed what that invention is, it's like, oh yeah, of course, that makes loads of sense. Of course that's what the weapon is. Of course it is. And it did change everything. It did change everything. And that's rather clever. I like that element of the book. And Jacobok is very charming. Despite being a vicious, cruel, nasty little bastard, he's very charming. He's actually a very good narrator, and you like him. You want to know what's happening to him, and you kind of feel sorry for him sometimes too. He has a lot of tragedy in his life, and you kind of feel sorry for this runty, nasty, ugly little demon. But beyond that, that's all you get. That's all you get from it. So it's a kind of maybe try before you buy thing with this one. It is not like, say, it is nowhere near like Weaveworld, where I'm like, yes, you have to read it. Yes, you have to read it. No, you don't have to read this one. You can miss this one out quite happily, and a lot of people do. So, ladies and gents, until next time, if there are any other Clive Barker books I've missed out, by the way, please let me know. Please let me know, and I'll do a retrospective on them. Until next time, ladies and gents, bye-bye!